Today, I want to talk about the biggest twist we all totally missed in You Season 4 that starts with Elliot, the Quinn family fixer, because I'm pretty sure he's not even real, you guys. And the implications of that are so interesting and vital to viewing Joe in the right light while he's running around London. Originally, I had spotted Elliot lurking in the background while Joe searched for Marienne, and I thought Joe's unawareness of him was indication to the viewer that he was in fact real because we saw him and Joe didn't. But no, Joe is just slowly losing his mind as he loses hope, chasing after the one who got away, and the dark part of him is simmering, waiting until they find her, because wouldn't you know, searching for her doesn't present the opportunity to kill as finding her eventually will. Looking back, Joe's encounter with Elliot is far too convenient to ignore, and in retrospect, it reveals the beginning of Joe's mental breakdown, distancing himself from his dark desires and true motives by projecting them onto an adversary, because that's the only way Joe knows how to define himself as a hero, by creating a bad guy to defend against and differentiate himself from. But it's all just him, and it always has been, even if he mentally negotiates back and forth or periodically tries to play out a remorse tour attempting to run from himself. But he always returns to and remains driven by who he is, an abusive sexual predator serial killer, and what he really wants, doing sex and violence. And Season 4 exposes this with the reveal that Joe is the eat the rich killer and simply projecting all of his violence onto Rhys while blocking it out so he doesn't have to worry about how to square it with his character. Because of course Joe was the one doing the killings, and the reveal further leads to the discovery that he never let Marienne leave on the train as he misled the audience to believe. While Marienne's time in the cage is an amazing episode, it can distract from the full realization that not only did Joe lie about what happened with Marienne, but he was completely imagining his entire conversation with Elliot. Having believed Elliot was real and now understanding the show better after Season 5, I want to admit that I was incorrect in my assessment about the character and now understand him to be fake as fuck, because Season 5 specifically reassured me that it's okay to do that. So let's talk about the revelation that Elliot was never real and what that says about the true start of Joe's mental breakdown. Once Joe finds Marienne and she rejects him, he knows that's the end of their story, but he doesn't know how to end it. Joe knows deep down that he can't let Marienne go, just like Candace and Beck before her, but he has spent months searching for her and doesn't know how to reconcile killing her with the character that he's built up in his head. He killed his wife, left his son behind, chopped off his own toes, wasted away searching for one woman across the world, all in pursuit of reuniting with Marienne, and then she just dismisses him as a murderer. Killing her right then and there would prove her right, and she can't be right about him, so he lets her walk away to prove her wrong. But he can't actually let her walk away either, because she knows what he's done, so he creates the scene with a new foe whose story is oh so perfectly crafted. Elliot Tannenberg, thanks for your full name, Mr. Hitman, shows up sent by Ray Quinn, the man who wasn't in Season 3 because he had written off his crazy daughter and ex-wife, to kill Joe for, I don't know, killing the daughter he didn't care about? Elliot somehow knows about Joe emptying a bank account of Love's earlier in the day that he was later baked into a pie, but why would he know that? And wasn't Love relying on her mother for money? And how could any secret money that Joe stole from Love be enough for Elliot to disappear and retire? It doesn't add up because it didn't happen. As Elliot gives Joe the chance to start over, keep a low profile, and make different choices, Joe himself is just setting up a repeat of Season 2, running from his bad past because he doesn't know how to make it mesh with the story he wants to chase. But he's created Elliot to lead him into it, handing him a new identity that Joe actually secured himself, as he later casually admits how easy it is to obtain fake documents if you know where to look. Elliot also voices the need for Marienne to be taken care of simply because she knows Joe is alive. This is coming from Joe. Just as he speaks his mind through Rhys, revealing his true desires that he tries to cover with the narrative more legitimate to remain inconspicuous, Elliot announcing that Marienne is going to be on the 8 a.m. train to Paris and that Joe needs to take care of her before he can move on as Jonathan Moore, is Joe's own awareness of it spoken through somebody else, a character that Joe has conveniently created for the purpose of projecting onto him something he can't outright acknowledge himself, to legitimize his abduction of Marienne. If Joe lets Marienne walk away and then turns around and kills her without any interference, then he's just a bad guy. But if he lets her walk away and Elliot shows up, demanding that Joe kill her, well then Joe can actually save her by abducting her. You know, like how he saves Bronte by abducting her from somebody else who was abducting her? Delusional as he might be, Joe has the desire to kill Marienne, and it is not an indication of any conscience or compassion that he doesn't do it immediately. His kidnapping and treatment of her actually reveals the true depth of his disregard for the woman he idealizes, leaving her to starve as a discarded draft in the dark. He tells Marienne goodbye in the stairwell, and do we get what that means? That means it's over. Their story is done, she needs to die, and anything between now and then is just Joe's unreliable narrative overriding his actions to portray himself in a favorable way. Joe insists insists that Marienne is wrong about him and that he'll prove it to her as he lets her walk away, and the very next actions he takes in that regard are following her to the train station where he drugs her coffee and abducts her in broad daylight, before taking her to his apartment, restraining her and drugging her, a recovered drug addict, and then injuring her and caging her with painkillers as she's withdrawing from his drugs. Through his attempt to prove that he would never hurt her, as having Elliot's permission wasn't enough to justify killing her, Joe has come up with an ending so heinous I don't think we talk about it enough, but don't worry, I'm going to. To avoid defiling his own character by killing Marienne, he drugs her daily and leaves her with a broken arm, withdrawal symptoms, and the same disgusting meal every day to compel her into overdosing and doing his dirty work for him. He rewrites his abduction of her, reflecting on stealing her necklace as proof of faking out Elliot when he's really holding it to fake out himself. He specifically blocks her out as he waits for her to die, and once he moves on to Kate, ditching Marienne for Katie like he dropped Karen to get back with Beck, he starts imagining Rhys just as he imagined Elliot, desperate for someone to play off and setting the scene to project his dark desires and blacked out murders onto his imaginary friend. As Rhys explains,
well, you poured all that darkness you hated into this vessel you admired because you knew that the end game was facing yourself, didn't you? All the worst bits in the little package you don't mind having a pint with.
in the moment, he's talking about Joe's recent revelation of Rhys as a figment of his own imagination, but this says something about Joe that we can apply to his construction of Elliot, filtering his own awareness of what needed to happen with Marienne through somebody other than himself, because the alternative would be admitting that he wants to kill her, which is something that contradicts his character at the time. Joe's concern is ending their story, and his prompt is to do so in a way where he doesn't hurt her, which means she has to hurt herself. But holy shit, the whole he doesn't hurt her thing hinges on the refusal to acknowledge that abducting her is hurting her, holding her hostage is hurting her, drugging her, throwing her in a cage, leaving her to overdose, starving her to death, that is all hurting her. Except to Joe, and too many fans, all of those different abuses are overlooked for the violent acts that they are, so long as he isn't the one to actually kill Marienne in the end. So while Elliot, Dark Joe, tells him, hey, just go take care of her and walk out Jonathan Moore, Joe isn't sold on that story because that makes him the bad guy, it's boring as fuck, and not a compelling narrative to just kill her for rejecting him. But he does intend for her to die no matter how many times he says the words, I would never hurt you, staring at her and her freshly broken arm locked in the cage. Joe sets the scene for Marienne to overdose, caging her and controlling her living conditions, just waiting for her to die so he can dispose of her body. His shock at discovering her in the cage doesn't count for much when you consider his true feelings being voiced through Rhys in the process. He's playing a character, Professor Jonathan Moore, professing such genuine remorse, while letting his real thoughts spill out through Rhys, communicated to the viewer but still hidden from Marienne, as Joe needs to maintain the appearance of being blameless for her situation, because he was disassociating. Oh yeah, I'm sure Ryan never used that excuse to justify abusing her before. Oh, I was high, I was wasted, I don't remember doing that. Sure, that makes it okay, right? Yeah, no, it doesn't. Choosing to block out what he's doing as he does it so that it doesn't interfere with the story he's telling himself does not absolve Joe from the violence that he commits, and what the Rhys-Joe split highlights in season 4 is the reality that Joe's actions and dark desires should define him more than the twisted narrative and fictionalized persona that he's playing out IRL. No matter how many times he tells Marienne that he won't hurt her, he would never hurt Juliet, and he's trying to make things better, he is just objectively not doing that. He is keeping her locked in a cage, knowing there's no way he will ever let her live and return to her daughter. His words mean nothing, they're just lies to not break character. At the moment, his idea about himself is that he would never hurt Marienne, who isn't posing any threat to him, so he can't outright kill her. While that wasn't a problem in the past, Joe's willingness to kill changes season to season, city to city, and you to you, because he does. When we're introduced to Joe in season 1, he doesn't mind killing and subtly enjoys it, although that's not the focus as he pursues Beck. He eventually kills her when she discovers that he's a murderer, and he prepares to start all over again in New York, unbothered by what he's done. Joe only runs to LA and takes on a new name, affirming that he wants to do things differently, because he's faced with Candace, who has seen the real him, and confronts him in a place so public that he can't pull the same shit as last time. So he commits to the bit, becoming Will Bettelheim and letting Love lead him through their story, because according to Candace's account of him, Joe pursuing Love would eventually lead to him killing her, which he can't accept from the jump, because what would that say about his character? That would make him the bad thing, a violent misogynist, to pursue a woman knowing that he would hurt them, but Candace is in his face confronting him with that inevitability, so he runs to figure out a workaround. For Love, he refrains from violence and manages to maintain his character in contrast with her through both seasons 2 and 3. Instead, he channels his sexual desire into preying on Ellie and Delilah, and his violent desires into killing Jasper after luring him to the storage unit and revealing his real identity, and killing Henderson after breaking into his house and revealing his real identity. Man, I'm noticing a pattern of people being killed after they see the real Joe. Is that why some fans are in such denial? Do they think accepting the real character of Joe will cause him to appear outside their window and come for them? It's okay. Joe Goldberg isn't real. Joe Goldberg can't hurt you. Just make sure to lock your windows. Once Joe cages Delilah, the inevitable conclusion is that she won't make it out alive, but we don't see it play out at the hands of Joe in season 2 because it's more interesting for Love to enable Joe's delusion about himself while mirroring his violence, with his reaction of rejecting her and rushing to kill her, exposing to the audience how easily he can turn on the woman he loves when she doesn't align with the character he wanted her to be. While he grants Love another chance as she announces she's pregnant, the excitement of raising a daughter fades when Henry is born, and Joe fakes it through his marriage in season 3, feeling no desire to kill for Love, but once again no guilt as he returns to killing for Love, targeting Ryan in his quest to conquer Marienne. He has moved on from his dilemma of what killing says about him because he's found that workaround. He kills people who really deserve it compared to Love, who is impulsive and kills the innocent. Joe thinks he has found his foil, but really he's just looking in a fucking mirror, and he returns to the romantic narrative of being a white knight riding in to save Marienne as a damsel in distress. First he kills Ryan, and then he kills Love, leaving him without an enemy once again, so when he finds Marienne, he's the threat. There's no greater evil to save her from. Even as Ryan was the villain of their story, Marienne rejects Joe for killing him. He couldn't convince Beck that Benji or Pete were bad enough to die, but after confiding in Marienne that he killed his stepfather because he was hurting his mom, Joe believed he could convince Marienne to accept his murder of Ryan in the same kind of way. As he searches Paris, his dark feelings and resentment build up inside of him, culminating in the creation of Elliot once Marienne closes the door on their story, and it's time for Joe to clean it up and move on. Joe personified his self-preservation and deeper awareness before in season 3 when he was suffering from the measles and planning to frame Matthew for Natalie's murder. Wearing a black shirt so that you know he's Dark Joe, he speaks to himself to focus and stay on task, directing a dizzy Joe on how to sneak into Matthew's undetected and remarking on his own secret planning of holding onto Natalie's bloody scarf. That speck of self-awareness is a small glimpse at the real Joe, especially considering he tells himself to shut up.
Sealed and everything. It's almost like you anticipated meeting it all along. Shut up. You shut up.
It's there, he knows what he's like, but he pushes it away because it clashes with the role that he's trying to play. It comes out again in Elliot and Rhys through season 4, portraying the two sides of Joe at odds as he struggles to narratively reconcile his dark desires for murder with the romantic fantasy he has been building about himself. Of course, Joe would lose his mind as he wants to murder women while playing out stories of loving women, because those two things don't work. That's the point. Joe's true disregard for the humanity of the women he pursues is portrayed in season 4 by channeling it through other characters like Elliot and Rhys. While prior seasons have drawn comparisons between Joe's behaviors and other predators, the 4th season is more direct and straight up voices his own thoughts through these imagined counterparts. It's no coincidence that both Elliot and Rhys want Marienne dead. They're both Dark Joe, directing him to focus and stay on task to wrap up the story of Marienne and move on, because that's what he wants to do deep down. Joe has always had two sides to himself. In season 1, he presents himself as a nice guy romantic while secretly being a sexual predator and murderer. And in season 2, there's more of a split between his violence and control misidentified as love versus his obsessive and addictive nature pursuing a story. By season 3, Joe's marriage and affair reveal the stark contrast between his outer portrayal, lying to Love about committing to their marriage, versus his inner thought, obsessing over Marienne. Season 4 splits Joe into his delusional narrative-driven mindset and his dark violent nature, letting Joe block out the violence that he wants to commit while unconcerned with squaring it within his characterization, but giving him a perfect opening to capitalize on the story to get closer to Kate. Once Joe has started fixating on Kate, leaving Marienne to shrivel up and die, I guess, he calls Elliot after Malcolm's murder, wanting to place the blame on anybody but himself. But Elliot was part of wrapping up Marienne's story, and his whole thing was wanting to move on from killing. Remember, Joe? How the whole fantasy of Elliot was that he was a hitman who wanted to retire? Yeah, so blaming Elliot won't work out this time, which later leads to projecting onto Rhys. And the call doesn't really prove that Elliot was real either, because Joe imagined Rhys. You don't think he can imagine a FaceTime? Dark jacket, Dark Joe, case closed. Elliot, not real. Just the start of Joe's mental breakdown in an attempt to avoid accountability for his deepest desires. But man, he was so real for this.
Like I'm not an idiot.
Yeah, kind of sounds like you are, though. Sorry to hear you fucked up your new life already. I wish you an end to suffering and the roots of suffering. And fuck you very much.